All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something pretty heavy, but absolutely crucial: how fear isn't just some random accident. It's actually a meticulously designed system. We often look at the news and see all this tension, division, and suspicion. But what we're really going to examine today is exactly how these narratives are manufactured. Now, we aren't here to pretend problems don't exist in the world. Every community has extremists, and every society has criminals. But when the actions of a very small few are engineered to become the defining identity of millions, something much deeper is happening. We're going to pop the hood and look at the invisible mechanics of this fear.
I mean, think about it for a second. What if hatred could literally be designed, repeated, and amplified until it just feels like the absolute truth? I want you to take a moment and consider how millions of ordinary citizens, teachers, doctors, workers, moms, refugees, they just sort of disappear behind these heavily manufactured narratives of suspicion. When an entire group is projected through the super narrow lens of extremism or backwardness, we really have to ask ourselves who actually benefits from this design.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to look at 1, the power of narratives, 2, the amplification machine, 3, the psychology of division, 4, the human cost, and finally, 5, breaking the cycle. Let's get into it.
All right, starting us off, Section 1, the power of narratives.
Look, before discrimination ever becomes official policy, or before people lose their rights, a narrative has to be built first to emotionally condition society. And honestly, there's a historical formula for this that is just incredibly potent. Because emotion and fear, they work vastly faster than truth. Throughout history, this exact 5-step playbook has been used to scapegoat specific groups. You select a minority, you associate them with danger, you selectively repeat those dangerous associations, you generalize that behavior to the entire population, and boom, you normalize suspicion. This was done to Jewish populations in Europe, to Black communities during segregation, to immigrants globally, and right now, in many places, to Muslims. Eventually, through this process, the prejudice doesn't even look like prejudice anymore. It just starts looking normal.
Moving right along to Section 2, the amplification machine.
Now, modern media shapes our imagination way more powerfully than our own personal experiences ever could. And this is driven by a psychological concept called availability bias. Simply put, it's the clinical definition of believing something is super common just because you see it repeatedly in the media. Think about it. A peaceful Muslim family just, going about their day, that's never going to be breaking news. But one extremist incident, that gets nonstop coverage for days, sometimes weeks. And because that is all the public sees, this nonstop coverage of isolated incidents creates a highly distorted, fear-driven version of reality.
And we see this bias reinforced constantly through media framing. It's wild. When a Muslim commits a crime, the media frame is almost immediately Muslim suspect, right? It ties the action directly to their entire religious identity. But when a non-Muslim commits a similar crime, the frame magically shifts to an isolated, mentally disturbed individual. This isn't just semantics. It shows exactly how identity framing is utilized to manipulate public emotion and build out that structural narrative we're talking about.
So why does the media do this? Well, to put it bluntly, the business of outrage. Fear sells. Anger has literally become a highly profitable business model. Media systems reward outrage with higher TV ratings, more clicks, increased ad revenue, and greater political influence. And on the political side, fear is one of the oldest tools in the book. When politicians fail to address real systemic issues, like unemployment or inflation or healthcare, minorities become incredibly convenient distractions. It shifts the public's question from, hey, why are we suffering, to who should we blame for this?
Of course, traditional media isn't acting alone here. Social media gives these lies absolute rocket fuel. We're talking troll factories, bot networks, propaganda pages, the whole shebang of coordinated misinformation campaigns. But here's the truly terrifying part. False information doesn't just spread online, it spreads exponentially faster than the truth. Studies have shown that fake news can spread up to 6 times faster than factual news, simply because fear and outrage trigger a visceral, knee-jerk emotional engagement. Once anger gets its hooks into a person's mind, facts really struggle to find a way in later. These digital amplifiers have one main goal: keep society emotionally polarized. Because, let's face it, a divided society is just way easier to manipulate. But hey, it's not just the news. We really have to ask ourselves, where are the ordinary Muslims in pop culture? Entertainment deeply, deeply shapes our subconscious thinking. Global cinema and media rely so heavily on these repeated, super narrow stereotypes, often portraying Muslims as violent mobs, radicals, or, silent oppressed women. A kid watching these movies is going to unconsciously associate Muslim identity with danger way before they ever even meet a real Muslim person in their actual day-to-day life. And that creates a massive blind spot for us. We have to actively break that mental shortcut. Because the reality is, millions of completely normal, everyday lives, scientists, artists, entrepreneurs, nurses, peace activists, teachers, soldiers, humanitarian workers, when only the extreme fringe hits our screens, the everyday humanity of an entire global population just vanishes. Which brings us to Section 3, the psychology of division. To really understand the psychological mechanics that turn ordinary neighbors into perceived enemies, we gotta look at our natural human instinct to form us versus them groups. Irresponsible narratives weaponize this basic instinct. Check this out. Once a society emotionally accepts that another group is dangerous, empathy for that group immediately plummets. As empathy drops, discrimination spikes. And eventually, violence against them becomes easier to justify. It's this tragic step-by-step sequence of how societies slowly become completely numb to systemic injustice.
Let's look at the real-world impact in Section 4, the human cost.
When a society actually normalizes hatred against a specific group, we see a really painful generational burden. We're talking about kids being bullied in schools, women targeted just for wearing a hijab, men treated with constant suspicion just because of their names or their beards. It means dehumanized refugees, attacked mosques, and isolated communities who constantly feel like they have to prove their loyalty. The psychological toll here is just immense. And honestly, whenever a society normalizes hatred against any one group, it ultimately weakens democracy and justice for absolutely everybody. So the absolutely crucial point here is how these two forces feed each other. On one side, you've got anti-Muslim hatred, discrimination, and dehumanization. On the flip side, extremist recruiters actively exploit that exact pain, isolation, and trauma. Now, to be perfectly clear, this never, ever justifies violence against innocents. But we have to understand that this is a vicious cycle. One side's hatred directly strengthens the other side's ability to recruit. It literally traps humanity in this endless loop of fear.
All right, finally, Section 5, breaking the cycle.
Look, emotional speeches aren't going to cut it anymore. We need concrete structural interventions to dismantle this fear machine, and we can categorize these responsibilities right across three main pillars. First, governments. They must enforce strong hate crime laws, punish organized misinformation, and ensure equal citizenship where your rights never depend on your religion. Second, tech platforms. They have a massive ethical duty to remove coordinated hate campaigns, spot bot manipulation, and pull the plug on the algorithmic amplification of violent misinformation. And third, citizens. That's us. We have a huge role too. We've got to verify content before we hit share and actually make an effort to meet real people outside of our little bubbles. There are also essential internal steps for Muslim communities to build resilience against these narratives. This includes investing deeply in education, building strong media literacy, engaging confidently with the wider society, supporting women's leadership, and openly rejecting extremist interpretations. Because silence against extremism, it just allows the loudest, most radical voices to define millions of peaceful people. Furthermore, we really have to look at the role of education across all of society. Schools absolutely must prioritize teaching critical thinking, media literacy, and the history of propaganda right alongside empathy and constitutional values. We need to teach kids exactly how narratives are manufactured to manipulate their emotions. Why? Because an educated, critically thinking mind is literally the hardest thing in the world to radicalize. Ultimately, this all comes down to your personal power as a citizen and a consumer of information. Before you forward that sensational post, take a second and verify it. Before hating a group you don't even know, go meet some real people. Break out of your algorithmic bubbles. Genuine human connection, just sitting down and sharing a meal together, destroys propaganda way faster than any online argument ever will. I want to leave you with this really powerful concluding thought. Human dignity must never depend on religion. A society isn't strong when its minorities live in fear. It's strong when they feel safe, and justice protects everyone equally. The real battle we're facing here isn't between different religions. The battle is between humanity and dehumanization, between truth and manipulation. So I have to ask, which side of history will you choose? When we sit back and allow hatred against one community today, we severely weaken justice for everyone tomorrow. Take these structural lessons, apply them to the media you consume every single day, and start conversations based on facts, not